darlings? Well, as it's been 10 years since I started my humble little YouTube channel, it's also been 5 years since I started the video format that I still do on my channel to this day. That of course being reviews, and there's no reviews more iconic for my channel than the Farthing Wood reviews, done back when I had a much better hairline, didn't have to keep doing this to it just to keep it consistent. Looking back on it, I can honestly say that my early Farthing Wood reviews were pretty embarrassing for me. I hadn't really found my full delivery style yet, so I sounded quite boring. The microphone I was using was awful, so it made me sound even more quiet. Some of my jokes were so obscure and specific to me that no one had any idea what I was talking about, and the lack of foresight I had when editing made the quality of the video when I cut back to me look really awkward. Seriously, what the hell is up with that frame style? It makes me look like I'm in some sort of pirated video. But with all that said, I still get a huge nostalgia trip when I look back at watching these old videos, even if they are barely half a decade old. Watching them really takes me back to when I was a fresh-faced fledgling reviewer talking about a bizarre kids show about woodland creatures killing each other, and looking for a new home I guess, but mostly the killing each other part. It still amazes me that some of the stuff in this show was able to be shown in the 90s completely uncut. I mean, yeah, if it was the 80s or the late 70s that would make sense, that's just how things rolled back then, but the 90s? Most of the adult stuff we got in kids shows back then was mostly just innuendo humour, not... well, we'll be reminded of that in just a minute. Now you would think that with all the violence, dark themes and Englishness of this series that it never would have been shown in America, right? I mean, this is the country that remakes every British show they import, regardless of how little sense it makes, and with some exceptions, they put as little effort into them as possible. But don't count American TV producers short. They may be idiots, but they're not wimps. Bearing in mind that when we got TMNT over here in the UK back in the 80s, they had to rename it Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles because the German censorship thought that the word ninja was too violent. And yes, I was there when they rerun the show back in the late 90s, so I can verify that. In fact, when the 2003 series came out, I was genuinely wondering why they changed the name. But with all that said, could a show as dark and messed up as Farthing Wood make it to the States? Well, yes, actually. And no. See, American TV seems to hate anything that isn't American. I mentioned the remakes, but if a show on US TV shows even the slightest bit of non-Americanism, the networks and the distributors dismiss it almost instantly. Only a few shows have managed to overcome that monopoly, but they haven't made it through completely unscathed. For example, when Stephen Moffat took over as the showrunner of Doctor Who in 2010, he seemed to try and make it more accessible to Americans by adding in some elements that were synonymous to US sci-fi shows like Babylon 5 and Firefly, but it seems that for the US distributors that still wasn't enough and added a really awful dumb teaser to the shows with a voiceover by Karen Gillan. As much as I love Old Redhead, this felt like a really cheap way to dumb it down for American audiences. And it's not just English shows that feel the pinch, isn't that right, 4Kids anime dubs?
Seto Kaiba, you are going to come with us.
Fine. If you can't pay the cash, then you're out with the trash!
This isn't even a recent phenomenon either. Back in the 1950s when the first Godzilla movie was brought to the States, they had to add in pointless scenes of Perry Mason just to have more American actors in it. American studios hate foreign movies and TV shows.
Yes, I see.
Perry Mason, eat your knob off.
And sadly, Farthing Wood was no exception, and while the first series was kind of released in the US, the changes they made were not only stupid, but they were done so to seemingly imitate another animation company that was rather popular at the time too. But rather than talk about it, why don't we take a look for ourselves, while I talk about it. In honour of the 5-year anniversary of me doing reviews on the internet, in video form anyway, this is the review of Animals of Farthing Wood, the US dub. This is not only a great chance to return to the franchise that created my most beloved series of reviews, it's also a chance for me to be able to get in some jokes and critiques that I missed the first time. And believe you me, I missed a lot the first time. So, let's get stuck in. First thing I have to say before this video begins is that I'm sorry about the quality of the video. This film is extremely rare and only one guy I know of has the upload. Thanks, Fieldmaster Foxx. So some of this will be a bit hard to watch, but it's the best I could find, I'm afraid, so sorry. And so we start off with wait, what? They took out the intro? How the hell could they take out the intro? For God's sake, you can't take out that intro. That's the thing that every fan of this franchise cares about. No matter what sort of fan you are, everyone loves that intro. The intense music, the animals running away from the unusually massive machines that have concrete flow like a waterfall out of it. Did anyone else think that was weird? Have you ever seen concrete be poured out of a cement mixer? It's nowhere near that dynamic. But worst of all, you denied us that amazing title reveal. That's the best part about any episode. You bloody yank bastards, what the hell were you thinking? This is the first of many bad omens to come. Firstly, in how much the editors had to take out for time reasons, since this is the first series condensed down into a direct-to-VHS movie, so it's only an hour and 20 minutes long. But also in how the people who made this clearly didn't understand Farthing would. Regardless of the lack of that awesome intro, this version of the first series starts off mostly the same as the regular one, with one slight exception, but I'll get back to that later too. But we open up on the humans doing the one thing that they're capable of in this world, being dicks to animals. This does make me wonder if Colin Down was a misanthrope, since pretty much every human character in this franchise, with the exception of the Warden I guess, is an arsehole. And even then, the Warden's not exactly the kindest and smartest of individuals.
That'll show you.
Anyway, the scene continues on as normal, though a bit condensed for time, as you'd expect, with Al and Badger, who are still voiced by Sally Grace and Ron Moody respectively, thank God, and you'd almost be forgiven for thinking that this was just a more abridged version of the first series at first glance. But then, this happens.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Shut it, Ralph Macchio.
Yes, one of the biggest and stupidest departures from the main series is that a handful of the characters are now voiced by different voice actors, very tragically, and the most infamous being Foxx, who is now voiced by Timothy Brisby and Bill Gambino himself, Ralph Macchio. Oh, and I guess he was in some sort of movie about a kung fu teenager, I guess. Does anyone remember that movie? And wasn't Jackie Chan in it or something? Yes, Daniel-san himself plays Foxx, which to this day I have no idea why he's the voice of Foxx. Foxx was always a character who seemed experienced yet young, and the kind of guy who made a good leader even though he didn't initially enjoy it. Ralph Macchio's biggest acting strength, at least at the time, was his arrogant but enjoyable personality, his wide-eyed innocence, and the fact that he doesn't take crap from anyone, which could work for Foxx, but not when he's interacting with all these characters who still act the same as they did in the original.
Then maybe one of us might come up with
a solution?
You don't need me to underline the gravity of our situation.
We all know that ever since the giant earth movers arrived,
life in Farthing Wood has become steadily more and more hazardous. For one and all.
Plus, why is he American when everyone else in this world, with some exceptions, and the location of the story is clearly English? I mean, if he was a squirrel or a mink, that would make sense, since most of those animals in England are American imports, but we've certainly not got American foxes over here. I think a stowaway fox would be pretty easy to spot on a boat or a plane. This was all done, as far as I can tell, to try and make the show more accessible to American viewers, because apparently the distributors over there think that a show with mostly non-Americans would be the downfall of the American nation. And sadly, it doesn't end with Foxx either.
Important enough to have an assembly, if you ask me.
Immediately after he's done talking, this character then suddenly bucks up.
Looks like we've got a bit of a problem. Clever Fox! Clever Fox!
Wow, I didn't think there was a way you could make Weasel's voice even more annoying, but somehow they found a way. Yes, Weasel for some reason was given the voice that sounds like a mix between Madonna in Who's That Girl and Harley Quinn. And why, you may ask? Absolutely no bloody idea. I guess in that nation when they think of a polecat they think, probably sounds like a character from Jersey Shore.
I am holding on.
The only solace we have this time is that she doesn't sing at all in this series. As such, we won't be needing this then. Sorry, Snowstoat. Unlike Foxx, I can't find any information for who voices Weasel. Or Ada for that matter. Oh yeah, jumping the gun a bit, but Ada's also voiced by a different voice actress, though hers at least makes a little bit more sense.
Not last, am I, Badger?
Well, somebody has to be Ada.
When did Rogue from the X-Men start living in Farthing Wood? Yeah, Ada's now got the voice of a Southern belle now, and while it is admittedly a little bit annoying since the person who voices her clearly can't do a very good Southern accent.
Shucks. I was so looking forward to a few glow-worms.
Even Joey's Southern accent is better than that.
The South will rise again, man.
I will give them credit that it is location appropriate since you do get a lot of snakes in southern rural areas of the United States. though it still doesn't make any sense why these three characters are in an English wood. Maybe Fox, Weasel and Adder weren't actually born in the woods, they were brought over from the US to be in a zoo and then they escaped. I mean, it does happen in the UK all the time. Where do you think the Beast of Bodmin came from? That and Wayne Rooney, I'm sure he escaped a zoo at some point in his life, though admittedly the redubbing of these characters isn't even the worst part of it. After a much shorter version of Fox telling Weasel, Owl and Badger that a meeting needs to be called, we then skip ahead to the actual meeting, but not before a quick montage of the animals gathering at Badger's set, but with some rather unexpected narration. You see, being a more condensed version of the first series, there's naturally some parts where narration is needed, since just skipping over major parts of the story would just be confusing and a mess, or at least more than it already is. So for parts where they skip over them, they had to have a narration to fill in the gaps, which is fine. While I don't agree with cutting down the series like this, if you're gonna do it, at least do it right. And hey, they've already got the sound bites to use with Ron Moody's Badger recaps from the first series. That's a perfect transfer for the narration.
And that's how it started. Every animal in Farthingwood came to the assembly.
No! I hate Ralph Macchio!
Yeah, it seems the distributors couldn't even let the narration be done by Limey Tea Biscuit, so Crossroads here gets to do it instead. This is stupid for a number of reasons. For one, Ron Moody's voiceover was perfect to begin with. You didn't need to have someone else do it. Plus, a British voiceover gives the film a much more storybook feel to it. Two, it doesn't make sense for Fox to be doing the recap because, unlike Badger, he's not with the train for the whole time, so he doesn't know everything that goes on with them. And third and finally, Ralph Macchio sucks as Fox! Ralph Macchio is not a voice actor. He's done voice acting at times, but he's not good at it. Part of Ralph Macchio's charm is his physical ability, both in action scenes and using his physical movements to complement his vocal performance. But when he's trapped behind a microphone, he can't do that. And what's more, he just sounds bored when he's voicing Fox.
We've got to face the facts. All of us. As a community, we're nearly wiped out.
It's like you can practically hear him reading off the script after having just read it just the one time. Which, granted, how I film my videos is a bit rich for me to say, but at least I'm the one who wrote the script in the first place.
I don't think we have a choice.
This just underlines the whole stupidity of having American voice actors in the series in the first place, and trust me, we still haven't gotten to the worst part yet. But before we get to that, Toad shows up, which, to be honest, does actually make more sense than him popping up at the beginning of the episode, since by the time the meeting happened I'd forgotten he even existed. Though this time he doesn't get buried by a ton of rubble, which is a shame since I always thought that was the funniest part of the first episode. But he turns up at the meeting as expected, though this does make me realise how Al acts towards him when he arrives seems rather harsh.
Bet you never thought you'd see me again, eh, mateys?
Well, did they have an affair that ended badly or something? Why is she so harsh to him? Though that has given me the mental image of a toad and an owl mating in my head. Though that has taken out the mental image of the monkey rapes frog video from YouTube. But of course, Toad tells them about White Deer Park, and the animals celebrate their new decision to move to their new home.
White Deer Park it is, everyone.
We're going to be going. It's clear that we can no longer stay. There's a world out there just waiting for us. There's a world we will explore.
The fuck? Yeah, this is one of the more infamous parts of the American dub. The random song of "We're going to White Deer Park" was strange enough in the original, but this is just insane. The animals just breaking the song out of nowhere with random skips ahead to the future episodes for no reason. Oh, and bits from the intro, so I guess they did put it in, but the theme song still isn't there, so I've not forgiven them for taking it out. Plus, whenever they have the characters actually shown while they're singing their lines, just makes it look awkward because the voices don't sync up with the lip movements.
I hear it's peaceful and sunny.
A perfect place for bunnies.
Given what happens to you in Series 2, I don't think it is. The random song sequences in the Alice in Wonderland porno movie from the 70s were less awkward and were more seamless than this. Though, unlike that movie, I do know why they included this song, despite the fact that there's no other songs like it in the original, and it's a reason that I can kind of understand. You see, on top of trying to make this show more accessible to the Americans, the distributors also had to deal with the animation Gestapos, Disney. Back in the 90s, Disney had the monopoly on animated feature films. After spending so long going through financial turmoil and only having just regained their foothold in the industry, they weren't ready to give it up. So they took every opportunity to eliminate any competition that they saw. But part of the consequences of this action was that in retaliation, and to try and sponge off some of their success, every animation studio in the country tried to emulate the Disney style. Pretty much every major animated movie that was released in the 90s was a Disney ripoff, or trying to use Disney elements, and while some were actually quite good, a lot of them weren't. But because Disney was the only company making money in this industry, at least theatrically, it meant that other companies were too scared to go up against the grind and just followed their example. With the exception of DreamWorks granted, of course, but even they took a few years to carve out their own identity for themselves, and it probably helped that they had an ex-Disney executive on their side. And eventually a UK animation slave that they abused for many years. The point I'm trying to make here is that most animation companies, even the smallest ones, were taking elements from the Disney movies and putting them into their films. And since this company who were distributing the animals of Farthing Wood couldn't put princesses in here, they went for the next best thing, a random celebrity guest and a song sequence. And while I can kind of understand why they did this, it's so badly forced to be Disney that it's just sad. And the worst thing is that the song, while awful, is annoyingly catchy, so once you've listened to it once, you won't be able to get it out of your head.
There's a world out there just waiting for us. There's a world where all is well.
There's a world out there just waiting for us. There's a... No! No! I need to get this song out of my head. I need to go and do something else. There's a world out there just waiting for us. There's a... Oh! Damn it! Need to do something else. There's a world out there just waiting for us. There's a... Oh! You see? It's impossible to get out of your head. Thankfully, like in the original, Hare interrupts this random mental breakdown and objects to going to a place that they don't even really know if it exists or not.
You mean vegetarians like us, alongside our natural enemies? The carnivores?
Hey, it worked in Zootopia. Though, admittedly, they never did actually say what the predators ate in that movie. Did anyone else think that was weird? Or did they just all eat popsicles? Of course, the oath is then sworn by the animals.
By the reintroduction of the ancient woodland vow.
Oh, I'm sorry, the vow. Why would they change the term of that? Is the term offensive to the Atlanteans?
It's a promise not to...
Frighten?
Terrorize nor consume one another.
Not even eat each other? How's a snake supposed to survive?
Quite. So if you'll all please raise your right paw.
That doesn't answer the question, Badger. And of course, Foxx is nominated as the leader, though why they didn't take a vote on who should be the leader is anyone's guess. Maybe the Farthing Wood community is a dictatorship that we just never realised. It does actually kind of make sense when you think about it. A large, powerful but mistrusted leader who's brought into power by a friend who's loved by the working classes and bosses people around all the time. Though sadly Kim Jong-un has never taken a break off from his dictatorship to get laid. Which, quite frankly, he should. He looks like he could use some tension relief. And so the animals then meet up to take the journey to White Deer Park, though, as a side, I always have wondered why there are only 2 types of each animal. I know they're trying to go for a Noah's Ark sort of thing. No, not that kind. And in terms of production, it is easy to keep track of and write characters when there's a lot less of them. But it is strangely convenient that most of the animal species of Farthing Wood only have one male and female member, and not all of them are couples, since Foal's travelling companion is his mother. Which just adds a whole ton of Freudian nightmares I don't even want to think about. Of course, Mole gets cross-wired about Adder's comments and runs off, and Badger decides to find him.
Oh, I'll give him late. He's always late. He'll be late for his own funeral, that mole.
Actually, that's also kind of ironic foreshadowing for Series 2.
Is that you, Moley?
No, it's some completely different mole that you've never seen your entire time in this park. Use your brain, you walking, talking barcode. So Badger gives Mole a lift and all the animals set off. They eventually arrive at the pool to drink the chlorinated water and no doubt get terribly sick and die of chlorine poisoning. Which would actually be one of the lighter deaths in this series. And Weasel and Adder have a little chat.
I can get you a drink, no problem. How much scratches it white, huh? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
This whole situation sounds like a conversation between Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. If Ivy had a southern accent, that is. Which would be really awesome. Someone please do that in the next Batman movie. So of course the animals attract the attention of the cat, which I've just realised strangely looks like the cat from Dick and Dom.
Stoke-on-Trent, oh yeah, to Stoke-on-Trent. Historic town on the River Trent.
So does that mean that Dick and Dom actually live right next to Farthing Wood? That would be awesome if that was the case, combining two of my favourite childhood shows into one. The only way it could be better is if the Chuckle Brothers and the Looney Tunes live across the road. And the events of course carry on the same, with a few exceptions. For example, the Newts are never mentioned, and while I admit that I did find their subplot a bit dull, their tragic implied death was one of the few instigating bits for Badger's character development, so removing it kind of takes that away from him too. But whatever, the fire then happens, though given that this is considered to be America, you'd expect a big grizzly and a park ranger hat to save Toad rather than Fox. Only you can prevent fritter frying. And of course Mole manages to make it back, though this time he isn't picked up by the fire crew, though we do hear what accents they have, so I guess this isn't America.
Hey, look at that!
Well, I'll be.
Oh, great fires of London.
Unless the American Midlands have suddenly had a load of Poms take up fireman jobs. To make America great again, we need to close the borders. But we'll still give out the shitty jabs to the foreigners. They then arrive at the farm, which despite how much was taken out of the series, they still kept in this scene. Now some of you may be wondering where the coal counter has gotten to, and well, since that's only for new deaths, I thought... Alright, I'll put it in! Bastard. It does actually surprise me that they did leave it in, though say what you will about American cartoons, they're not above killing off characters. Though that does make me wonder how far they went with leaving in the deaths. The animals of course then dig their way out, though admittedly Weasel saying this line...
Well, don't just stand there, get chewing!
Does also make me think of this line.
Wanna try some of my pie? I'm sure you'll want seconds.
And that's something I don't ever want to compare in my head. And the animals, with the exception of Ada, make it to the cops, though they take out the part where Fox outsmarts the dog, which is the only part I think Ralph Macchio could have done well, but no, they left it out. Of course, Pheasant goes off to find Ada, which then of course leads to this. Which still doesn't get easier to watch no matter how many times you've seen it. I think it's just that sound effect when the farmer's gun comes into shot. I mean, that is just wrong. Though I do wonder why they left that death in, because then immediately after, this happens.
We knew we'd never see the pheasants again. But the rest of us were safe. Even Adder, who'd found her way back from the farm.
So Pheasant's death in this version of the series was even more pointless because Adder made her own way back. Well, I guess the great Fox dictator had to be appeased, so someone had to die, I guess. Then there's the river.
Rabbits, what are you doing?
I can't see what's happening.
Neither can I. The contrast is so bad it makes it look like you're swimming in a giant white void. But of course, Badger goes to help Fox, who got into trouble whilst trying to help the rabbits, and he's supposed to sound tired, but he just sounds bored.
It's no good, Badger. I'm done for. Save yourself.
I know we're not getting renewed for a second series, just end it now. And of course they're swept off the waterfall, which, now that I think about it, where is there a waterfall in the English Midlands? I mean, we do have weirs, but not full-on waterfalls. But regardless, Fox goes missing and Badger, well...
Get him a body bag! Yeah! Alright.
No, of course not. Weasel's patented resuscitation technique brings him back round, but Fox gets swept away, or rather he does that weird disappearing act, though I get now that he probably jumped into that boat we see under the bridge, which was a dick move, but it's all part of his development. Though what isn't is this.
Things can go from bad to worse. You've begun to learn. It's hard to know what to believe or which way to turn.
Oh great, who invited the Carpenters along for this? Yeah, more cheesy songs again, though this one doesn't even have anything to do with the scene it's in. It's not even sung by any of the characters, it's just thrown in here for no rhyme or reason. Besides, if you really want to add a song to this scene, this is the one you'd use. Come on, I had to make that reference. Though I guess this song would actually be more appropriate. Either one works. Though this song does provide another purpose besides trying to be more Disney-fied. It leads into a montage which skips over most of the parts where Foxx and the rest of the train are separated, which, to be fair, that does actually work, since those parts are always the more boring parts of the first series. Plus it means we have to listen to less of Volv's whining, though right now I'm not sure if that's preferable to this horrendously tripe song.
So follow your heart.
Though at the very least I'm just counting my blessings it's not Ralph Macchio singing these songs. But the worst of all is that this montage confirms my biggest fear. They cut out the mice impaling. Come on, you know that's all I want to see in the first series, and even if it's not in it, fuck it, we're showing it again. Mick Taylor would be proud.
Here we come.
No, not that one, the other one. That's it. Foxx still comes across Nigel Thornberry's horse reincarnation.
That was smashing!
And then swiftly comes across Vixen, who, to be honest, I was really hoping would be voiced by Hilary Swank. But no, it's still Sally Grace, though that's still fine. It's just really awkward seeing these two flirt when one of the characters is voiced by someone else.
I haven't eaten since yesterday.
Then your wits will be sharp. Care to join me?
Well, things are looking up.
It's almost like a weird, bizarre voice acting version of Catfish. He's pretending to be an Italian American when he's actually a British guy. So maybe he's Guy Ritchie. It then transitions to Foxx and Vixen talking about Foxx and Vixen's own experiences, though they thankfully cut out the part where Foxx says leading the train has been a nuisance, which was one of the parts I didn't like in the first series. And in all honesty, by cutting out a lot of Foxx's indecisiveness, it actually works for his character, though I still wonder why he jumped onto the boat to get away from them if that wasn't his intention. But hey, I'll take the little victories where I can take them in this series. Plus, I'll give Ralph Macchio credit, he did say this line really well.
What are you waiting for?
The sooner I find them, the sooner I lose you.
I could genuinely feel some emotion there. Of course, this leads to the most iconic moment of Series 1, Foxx and Vixen's chase with the Fox Hunters, and it's still great, and that hilarious dog pile-up is still funny as well. And surprisingly, this part isn't that trimmed down, so I'll give the people who made this movie that, they at least had the intelligence to keep this scene unaltered. And even Ralph Macchio's voice acting is getting a little better here.
Oh no. What have I gotten you into?
Hey, I said it was getting a little better. I didn't say he turned into John DiMaggio in the meantime.
Hey, why don't you go bite my shiny man you son of a Let's go already!
Foxx then draws the hounds up the hill, which doesn't go down well with the other animals.
He's bringing them up here!
Don't panic, Mr. Mandarin! Don't panic!
Of course, Ada saves Vixen, though this time we don't get a bit where Weasel confronts Ada about doing so this is even more out of nowhere than the original. But at least it means we get to hear less of their voices, I guess. And Vixen joins the train.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Welcome, my dear. You're one of us now.
One of us, one of us, one of us.
After that, the film then abruptly cuts to the quarry, which again, due to the contrast, makes it feel like I'm being flashed by the neuralizer from Men in Black, and we meet Whistler again, who still thankfully has the John Pertwee-esque voice, though he barely makes a whistling noise, so his name doesn't make any sense this time, and they skip over most of this episode to where he asks to join the train.
You know, I do find you animals rather intriguing.
He'll be asking if he can come with us next.
Not a bad idea, that.
At this point, they're mostly skipping over most points of the series, which is kind of understandable. Most of the parts after Vixen joins the train is mostly filler. Good filler granted, with some really intense moments.
Don't curl up.
But very little of it has any impact on the grand narrative. As such, we cut straight to the part where the animals make it into town, which is where things get more exciting again in my opinion. Mole then finds the hole in the wall in the church and the animals go and seek shelter inside.
Do you have to shake your fur dry all over us?
If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. We smaller animals must stand up for our rights.
You've only said that once this series. Very thankfully, anyway. Of course, then as the title was called in the original series, Pandemonium happens, and the animals make their way out of the church. Though, unfortunately, another song rears its ugly head, the same one they use for the ads of the VHS, and it's by far the worst song of the lot.
We can do it, yes we can. We will never cower. We can do most anything. We've got animal power.
Not just how it sounds like a mix between the Smurfs theme song and the song from the Garbage Pail Kids movie, but it just doesn't fit. This scene was supposed to be a mad comedic harebrained moment with all of the animals running out of the church. Here, they make it seem like a grand moment, which it's far from. Need I remind you that in the original series, one of the main characters was about to get drunk in a few minutes. This is hardly the time or place for a song about how great or brave the animals are, especially since they're running away. Besides of which, if you wanted to ham-fistedly insert a song into this scene, this is the one you use. Now cue the hundreds of requests I get from people to review the raccoons. Anyway, they make it out of the church and oh, wait, hang on, what's going on here? Why is the road from episode 10 showing up here? Yeah, so as it turns out, the infamous motorway did make it into the series, just in the wrong place. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense, especially since a motorway is going to feel like a downgrade from that big church scene we just had. Well, whatever, it's nearly over, so let's wrap this up. The animals do end up crossing the road, and as it turns out,
Don't curl up.
is in there, and it's just as disturbing as it was the first time. Wow, they really neutered this series, only 4 deaths. Though that's still more than Series 3, ironically. But after that's over, we finally make it to White Deer Park, but not before we have a final montage and a reprise of the Follow Your Heart song sequence. And to be fair to the editors, Toad's comment of,
And now it's all clear sailing to White Deer Park,
does actually make sense here because White Deer Park is right after the road. And so the train arrives at the park to meet the Great White Stag, who I'm disappointed is not voiced by Morgan Freeman, though then again Rupert Farley's voice is still great to hear as the stag, and this failed experiment in half-assing the show's import to another country has finally come to an end. I'm not quite sure if I'm sad or happy about the fact that they never did an adaptation of Series 2 in this style, since on the one hand I'm glad that I never got to see how they messed up my favourite series, but on the other hand I would have really loved to have seen how they did Scarface. You know where I'm going with this.
Fuck Gaspar Gomez and fuck the fucking Diaz brothers! Fuck them all!
I don't care if I'm the only one who finds it funny, I still love it.
Welcome to White Deer Park.
So at last our journey was over, and our new adventure was about to begin. At last, we were home.
Why don't you go have a party with Luke Skywalker and Harry Potter and Warhorse and all the other movie bad guys and stop ruining mine!
So that was the American release of Animals of Farthing Wood, and what did I think about it? It was dumb, insulting and poorly made, and is basically what you would have expected out of an American adaptation of a beloved foreign TV series. I give them credit for trying to introduce Farthing Wood to a new nation, I really do, but this was not the way to do it. They should have just aired the English episodes uncut, which is what I've heard eventually happened, so it's good that this first horrendous attempt has just been forgotten like CITV's version of Horrible Histories. Farthing Wood is not a perfect series, I'll be the first to admit that, but it's still a great story and really entertaining, and despite how much of the first series can drag, it created the perfect atmosphere and mood for the show, and it fit perfectly with the theme of going on a journey. me. And with them messing it up like this, it just made the whole thing feel eclectic and a mess. This is basically one hair's breadth away from being a YouTube poop about Farthing Wood. If they were going to do an American version of Farthing Wood, they should have just gone the whole hog and done their own original version of it with their own cast. But that's a discussion for another day, I think. Overall, even though this was a slog to get through, I can't deny it did give me a massive nostalgia trip and reminded me how much it was great to be back in my early days. Though also the relief in how I don't have to review this series episode by episode anymore. The fact that I only had to review one, granted very long, but only one episode, made it a great change of pace when reviewing Farthing Wood. But now it's time to move on to bigger and better things. And I've had enough of this. I'm going on the other side to have a bath. Bye!